Block 1. Einstein's Forgotten Genius. What if Albert Einstein, the very symbol of genius, told you that the most important, the most significant creative mathematical genius to exist in centuries was a woman? And what if that same woman, a figure whose work underpins our entire modern understanding of the universe, was systematically erased by the very institution she served? Her name forbidden from official university schedules, her groundbreaking lectures delivered for free, her world-changing discoveries nearly lost to history. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. It's the shocking, true story of a mind so brilliant it terrified the academic establishment, and a betrayal so profound it echoes to this day. We're about to uncover the story of the woman Einstein championed, the university that silenced her, and the single elegant idea that secretly governs everything from the spin of a galaxy to the conservation of energy itself. Before we can reveal her name, we have to understand the world she shattered. Picture the early 20th century. Physics was in a state of glorious, chaotic revolution. Einstein had just unleashed his theory of general relativity upon the world, a radical new vision of gravity not as a force, but as the very curvature of space-time. It was a masterpiece, but it had a problem. A deep, unsettling flaw that gnawed at the world's greatest minds, including Einstein himself. The theory was so revolutionary that it seemed to violate one of the most sacred principles in all of physics, the law of conservation of energy. This law is fundamental. It states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. It's the reason a light bulb gets hot, the reason a car moves, the reason you can even exist. General relativity, in its initial form, seemed to suggest that energy could simply vanish into the warping of space-time, a concept that was mathematically messy and philosophically terrifying. This wasn't just a minor bug, it was a potential crisis. The greatest physicists and mathematicians on the planet converged on this problem. In the German city of Göttingen, a place that was the undisputed global center of the mathematical universe, two giants of the field, David Hilbert and Felix Klein, were locked in a race with Einstein to formulate the final correct equations of general relativity. They were wrestling with this energy conservation paradox, throwing the full force of their legendary intellects at it, and they were getting nowhere. The problem was deeper than they imagined. It wasn't just about fixing one theory. It was about finding a universal truth, a master key that connected the abstract beauty of symmetry with the hard physical laws of the universe. Symmetry is an idea we intuitively understand. A perfect sphere is symmetrical. It looks the same no matter how you rotate it. A snowflake has rotational symmetry. But what does that have to do with energy or momentum or any physical law? At the time, nobody knew. They were seen as two completely separate domains, the elegant abstract world of mathematical symmetries and the practical, concrete world of physical conservation laws. It was like having two different languages that described the same world but had no dictionary to translate between them. The crisis in general relativity was a symptom of this deeper disconnect. Everyone was fumbling in the dark because they were missing the fundamental Rosetta Stone that linked these two ideas. They needed a new way of seeing, a perspective so profound it could unify these disparate concepts into a single cohesive whole. This is the stage upon which our forgotten genius enters. She wasn't a celebrated professor with a grand office and a legion of students. She was an outsider, a woman in a field utterly dominated by men, working in the shadows of giants like Hilbert. But she possessed a unique power, an ability to see beyond the complex tangled equations and perceive the underlying abstract structure. While others were trying to brute force a solution with complex calculations, she was thinking about the fundamental nature of reality itself. She asked a different kind of question. What if symmetry isn't just a pretty pattern? What if every symmetry in nature is a promise, a guarantee that something, somewhere, must be conserved? This question, this single shift in perspective, was the key. It was a thought so profound that it would not only solve the energy crisis in Einstein's theory, but would go on to become what many physicists now consider the most beautiful and important theorem in all of science. A theorem that would be stolen, suppressed, and separated from its creator's name for decades. The solution was there, waiting in the mind of the one person the system was designed to exclude. Her name was about to be whispered in the halls of Göttingen, even if they refused to print it.
Academic injustice unveiled. The woman who solved the puzzle that stumped Einstein, Hilbert, and Klein was Amalie Emmy Noether, and the solution she discovered is now known, fittingly, as Noether's theorem. It is, without exaggeration, one of the most elegant and powerful ideas ever conceived by a human mind. It is the bedrock upon which much of modern theoretical physics is built. And yet, the story of its creation is a case study in institutional betrayal. Emmy Noether presented her theorem in 1915 and published it in 1918. The theorem provides a stunningly direct link between symmetry and conservation laws. It's the dictionary that everyone was missing. What it states is this: for any differentiable symmetry of the action of a physical system, there is a corresponding conserved quantity. That sounds complicated, so let's break it down with the sheer beauty it deserves. Noether showed that the most fundamental laws of the universe are not arbitrary rules, but direct consequences of its underlying symmetries. Think about the law of conservation of energy. Why does it exist? Noether's theorem gives the answer. It exists because the laws of physics are the same today as they were yesterday and as they will be tomorrow. They have time translation symmetry. Because of that single simple symmetry, energy must be conserved. It's not a coincidence, it's a mathematical certainty. What about the conservation of momentum? Why does a billiard ball continue to move in a straight line until it hits something? Noether's theorem proves it's because the laws of physics are the same here as they are a foot to the left or a mile to the right. The universe has spatial translation symmetry. Therefore, momentum be conserved. The conservation of angular momentum? It's a direct result of the laws of physics being the same no matter which direction you're facing, rotational symmetry. Noether didn't just find a solution, she revealed the fundamental architecture of reality. She had handed the world's physicists the master key. With her theorem, the energy conservation problem in general relativity was instantly resolved. It provided the rigorous mathematical foundation that Einstein's theory desperately needed. She had saved the theory of the century. And for this monumental achievement, what was her reward? Nothing. Less than nothing. She was paid a salary of $0. But the financial insult paled in comparison to the academic erasure. Emmy Noether worked at the prestigious University of Göttingen, the mathematical heart of the world. Yet, the university faculty, the so-called philosophical faculty, refused to grant her the right to teach under her own name, a process called their reason, her gender. The statutes, they argued, made no provision for a woman to become an independent lecturer. The situation became so absurd that the great David Hilbert, her staunchest ally, stood up in a faculty meeting and thundered his now legendary rebuke. I do not see that the sex of the candidate is an argument against her admission. After all, we are a university, not a bathhouse. But even Hilbert's outrage failed. The faculty voted against her. So, for years, this brilliant mind, the intellectual peer of Einstein, was forced into a humiliating charade. To allow her to teach, Hilbert had to advertise his own courses in the university catalog and then simply have Emmy Noether deliver the lectures instead. The most important woman in mathematics was a ghost in her own classroom, her name officially forbidden from the schedule. She worked for years without a title and without pay, supported only by her family's inheritance. Her contributions were often published under the names of male colleagues or buried in papers where her authorship was downplayed. It was a systematic institutional effort to benefit from her genius while simultaneously denying her existence. This wasn't just a case of overlooking someone, it was an act of suppression. The system saw her value, consumed it, and then meticulously wrote her out of the story, all while she was standing right there, quietly revolutionizing their entire field. The injustice was staggering, a deliberate act of intellectual theft on an institutional scale.
Block 3. Legacy and Modern Impact. The attempt to erase Emmy Noether ultimately failed, but not because the system corrected itself. It failed because her ideas were simply too powerful to be contained. Noether's theorem was not just a clever trick to fix general relativity. It became an essential tool for discovery, a guiding principle for all of physics that followed. Today, her theorem is a cornerstone of the Standard Model of particle physics, the theory that describes the fundamental forces and particles of the universe. When physicists at the Large Hadron Collider search for new particles, they are using her work. The symmetries she connected to conservation laws are the very things that dictate the properties of quarks, leptons, and bosons. Her theorem tells physicists what is possible and what is forbidden in the quantum realm. It is used to understand everything from the internal structure of protons to the behavior of black holes. Every single student of theoretical physics learns her theorem, not as a historical footnote, but as a vital, working piece of intellectual machinery. Her uncredited work became the silent, invisible scaffolding upon which a century of physics was built. Recognition, when it finally came, was tragically late and mostly posthumous. After years of working for free, she was eventually given a small, unofficial paid position at Göttingen, but she was never granted the full professorship her male colleagues with far lesser accomplishments enjoyed. When the Nazis rose to power in 1933, Noether, being both Jewish and a woman with pacifist leanings, was among the very first professors to be dismissed from her post. She fled to the United States, finding a position at Bryn Mawr College, but died unexpectedly just 2 years later in 1935. It was only after her death that the tributes truly began to flow. Albert Einstein wrote a glowing obituary in the New York Times, containing the famous line that she was the most significant, creative mathematical genius thus far produced since the higher education of women began. Decades later, the scientific community would name an asteroid, a crater on the far side of the moon, and numerous academic programs in her honor. But this posthumous praise highlights a crucial and uncomfortable truth. It is far easier to name a crater after a dead woman than to give a living one a job and a fair salary. Noether's story is the quintessential example of the Matilda effect, a term coined to describe the systemic repression and denial of the contributions of female scientists whose work is often misattributed to their male colleagues. Her experience forces us to confront the ethics of academia and the immense cost of prejudice. How much progress did we lose? How many other Emmy noters were there, minds just as brilliant, who were denied an education, discouraged from pursuing their passion, or simply gave up in the face of a system designed to reject them? The injustice done to her wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a theft from all of humanity. We were all robbed of the discoveries she might have made in an environment that nurtured her genius instead of suppressing it. Her legacy, therefore, is twofold. There is the brilliant, beautiful legacy of her theorem, a permanent and profound truth about our universe. But there is also the cautionary legacy of her life. It is a stark reminder that history is not a passive record of events. It is an actively constructed narrative. And for centuries, the people who held the pens purposefully wrote women out of the story. Correcting the record isn't about rewriting history. It's about revealing the history that was always there, hidden in plain sight. Emmy Noether's story compels us to look closer, to question who gets the credit, and to fight for a world where genius is recognized and rewarded regardless of the body it happens to inhabit. The most important woman in mathematics is no longer a secret, and her story is a lesson we can't afford to forget.